I'm Darren.
I'm Derek, and this is the Double D Podcast. We're back with an interview today, and this time we have somebody who I believe has recently made their Battle on the Border debut. Someone who actually poses a huge threat, in my opinion, personally, to Battle on the Border. We'll get to that later, and that is Benjamin Kimera. How are you doing today, sir?
Oh man, thank you for having me. I'm crushing it, right where I want to be in life. A threat to Battle on the Border, like a threat to the company?
Well, I mean, listen,
That's okay. I'm a threat to the company. You nailed it.
Well, there you go. See, I didn't want to be rude to start off, but I mean, like, we'll get into that later as far as like the plans for More So Mayhem coming up. But let's start out first because I'm sure there are some fans out there who maybe aren't as familiar with your work as some others. So, what got you into professional wrestling as a fan?
As a fan, I mean, I was kind of an odd trajectory, I guess. So when I was younger, I got into it through my friends at school, and my dad was I grew up in Detroit, and that's where I'm from, and my dad was a very big Bobo Brazil fan as a kid, and he kind of got into it with me, and I, of course, was a big Hogan guy growing up as a kid. My parents were, very religious, so I took a break from wrestling because they didn't really like the direction the company was going in with The Undertaker and stuff like that. And I got back into it a little bit in high school, but when I graduated from high school, I ended up spending 2 years doing missionary work in Haiti, and I came back and was kind of like aimless, and that's when I decided to pursue wrestling school. I tried it and I loved it, and I've been doing it 25 years.
25 years is a long time to be doing this. How has that affect? I mean, 25 years. Throughout that time, how much has wrestling, and you don't have to get super specific here, but just like from the beginning of your career to now, how much harder is it to do what you do in the ring?
You mean like physically as you get older?
Yeah.
It's harder in the sense, it depends on your work, as far as like your working style. I definitely don't do as much in the ring as I used to do. I've definitely slowed down considerably, not as far as like being aggressive or with my pacing, but I'm not coming off the top rope. I'm not, you know what I mean? I'm not doing that kind of stuff. It is a little bit more challenging to recover the next day. But really it's just like you've been in a really, hard football or basketball game, if that makes sense.
Yeah.
It's just a longer recovery time, but you definitely have to change up what you do in the ring as you get older because, you can't take those bumps anymore like you used to.
Yeah. It's crazy to see. I feel like wrestling kind of has, you see some wrestlers who obviously overstay their welcome. As far as like, I'm not going to name specific names, but then you see some people who are like Sting, who recently doing it at 60. Undertaker did it until he was in, well into older age. It's kind of a crazy thing to see because when you see what they do, you wouldn't expect. That's one of the things that I love about professional wrestling because, I mean, you look at like football players. Tom Brady was a crazy example of someone who was 40 or something like that, and that was crazy. Then you see wrestlers in their 40s. A lot of times I feel like are like wrestlers in their prime. I mean, there's some wrestlers who are in their 40s who are like, I think LA Knight's in his 40s, AJ Styles, barring his recent injury, but he was in his 40s and he was starting to really get cooking. So, I mean, would you say that that comes with experience just as far as doing it for so long that you start to really get that experience and it really starts to shine? Or is it like is there a magic age where like 40 it seems like competitors really start to kick it into high gear for some reason?
I think it really depends on the person because for some people it could take a long time and then it'll just magically click one day. But it'll take a while because there's a very big difference. When I first broke in, I was at the very tail end of like the old school, old style of wrestling, or AKA learning how to work, if you will. And right when right when 2001 rolled around, that's when ECW went out of business.
Mm-hmm.
That's when WCW went out of business. It was effectively really the end of the Attitude Era.
Yeah.
And then you had on the indies that East Coast style pop up, which was more influenced by Japanese wrestling, and you had Ring of Honor, and you had a lot of stunts, and you had what we call it, a spot fest,
Right. Yeah.
where it was, and AEW, mimics a lot of that now,
Mm-hmm.
but the guys that quote unquote learn how to work, they're usually the ones that have that level of longevity to them. And I'm not saying that to diss anybody else's style, but you can't do a moonsault to the floor 4 times a match every single night, and not expect the bill to come due.
Mm-hmm.
If that makes any sense. I hope it does.
Yeah. Oh, it makes perfect sense. I mean, I listened to Mick Foley's podcast, Foley's Pod, and he talks about how he did that from the apron, doing the elbow from the apron, how even early on in his career that was really starting to take a toll. And now, he's, well retired, been retired for years now, and it still affects him to this day, where his hips mess up, he walks with a limp. And that's somebody who doesn't necessarily, and that was what made that move so cool, right? Was because that's not what you expect from him. But even the times that he did, and he did it quite a bit, but still that simple of a move takes a lot of, well, not simple, but you get what I'm saying. He's not doing like crazy moonsaults.
You're right. It's not crazy, but he was part of that Bill Watts WCW run, where they pulled the mats.
Yeah.
So there were no mats outside of the ring, and he was, doing that elbow drop from the apron to the floor on the cement. And you do that. You think you work a TV taping, and then you work a house show 4 times a week. You do that. You're literally doing that maneuver about 22 times a month.
Yeah.
And I'm not trying to be Debbie Downer, but that certainly adds up.
No, oh, absolutely. And like I said, that's for me, as I'm getting older, I think that's because you hear a lot of people say that, where they're fans of wrestling as a kid, and then they grow out of it when they learn that it's the bad word, they're fake. When they learn it's fake, they look it up. But when I stayed in it when I get older is because the amount of damage that people are willing to do to their body just for the sake of doing something that they love or entertainment is admirable, in my opinion. You don't get a lot of people who are willing to do stuff like that just for the pure love of it, especially when you're working on the indies or back in the day where you're not getting paid very well, but you do it just because you love it. And that's one of the things that's made me an even bigger fan that I've gotten older.
Did you ever try to train?
I am currently actually in training now.
Oh, nice. All right. Awesome. How's it going?
Well, I didn't really know I was ever going to train. Ironically, I never really thought about being a wrestler. And then Denim, owner of Out on the Border, actually was the one that said he was starting a training school. And Darren, my co-host here, who said he was going to do it. And I was like, well, I can't let him one-up me. I guess I'll do it. Then, unfortunately, he got injured right before. He injured his shoulder right before, so he had to back out. But I'm like, well, I've made my commitment. I have to do it. So I think I'm like 7 weeks in. In fact, this upcoming Wednesday will be the 8th week. And, the first week we were just doing, not to get I guess behind the scenes here, but we were just kind of learning how to bump properly without any moves or anything. And I was definitely sore for the first couple of days afterwards. And now, as we're getting on, I'm not necessarily getting used to it, but it's easier to deal with as of now. I know that here soon we're going to start ramping up, and I'm sure I'll start to feel it. But ironic that you actually bring that up, because I was going to ask you, when you first started training, what was your biggest surprise or shock or something that happened that you didn't necessarily expect?
I think that the biggest surprise that I had was just the difference in the cardio. So, I'd always played sports and stuff like that, and I used to be really skinny when I first started, and I would think, okay, well, I play football and I play basketball, and I've got some wind to me. It's a completely different element of getting yourself into a cardiovascular space than any other sport that there is. It's really challenging, but it's essential because it doesn't matter if you're 160 pounds or 400 pounds. Like Vader, for better or for worse, Vader had excellent cardio. That guy could go 30, 40 minutes and be fine. And it didn't really have to do with his weight or whatever. It had more to do with, the type of cardio. That was the biggest thing to me. And making sure your cardio is up and you're good is essential, only because you can't be blown up in there, otherwise you're going to hurt somebody really badly.
Yeah, see, that's the one thing I'm the most nervous about, because we haven't really had the chance to challenge our cardio yet, because we've had rope issues with the ring that we've been using, so we haven't really had a chance yet. And he to kind of break the veil here, Sergeant Ledbetter actually is the one that's training us, and he even said that at the last class.
That is great.
You guys are doing great right now. You're all kind of catching on to what we're doing, but I haven't got to challenge you cardio wise yet. And once we start doing that, that's where we'll really start to see where we're at. So I'm a little nervous about that, but I'm preparing myself for that, because I know I'm not going to be great at first. But I think maybe I'm wrong here, but is it the reps where you just start to do it enough where it starts to build, or is that something you truly just have to work on all the time, 24/7?
So you'll hear an anecdote from wrestlers that will say there's no substitution for the cardio in the ring, and that's, for the most part, that's true. That's the best place to get the cardio. There's other things you can do though, and I think that some of them a lot of times are overlooked. The first one is playing basketball, really intense. And it's not about the reps per se, because people think cardio, I got to run, I got to be aerobic, I got to go in a straight line. That's not what pro wrestling is. Pro wrestling is starting, it's stopping, it's starting, it's stopping, it's adjusting your speed, it's moving quick, it's building up to a comeback, it's building up to, that towards the end of the match, you have to, that's where the cardio comes in, because you're going to start fast, you might go slow as you're feeling out your opponent, and then towards the end, you're going to go fast again. So if you're looking to build up cardio outside of the ring, the best way are, in my opinion, basketball. And I'm talking it doesn't even matter if you're good at basketball, just hard basketball, because you're running up and down the court, you're starting and you're stopping, you're playing defense, you're shuffling, you're moving your feet, you're getting your foot speed underneath you, and all of that's super important. The other thing is, if you have a high school track, a pill-shaped track, a quarter mile, if you sprint the straight part and you power walk the curve, that's a great way to build up cardio. And I usually say, hey, man, do that for a couple miles, because at least 2, which would be 8 laps, and that'll help build up your cardio quite a bit, because you're starting and you're stopping. But another good one too is step aerobics, and a lot of people, back from the 80s, that's really good, because that gets your foot speed going. Right. And that's where a lot of people get tripped up in the ring is, they can't get their feet off the mat.
I'll have to keep that stuff in mind. We're coming up here soon. Darren has a question.
All right,
Sure.
So to kind of veer off the whole training stuff, you said you've been wrestling for 25 years, correct?
You got it.
What was your biggest challenge in your career of professional wrestling?
There's been quite a few of them, and I'm not. It's a really great question, but I will retort with, can you be more specific about the challenge?
I guess for say more like a physical challenge,
Hardest match.
Yeah, one of the either hardest match or
probably. I've had multiple Ironman matches. That gets tough, but it also is kind of weird, because it gets really cool after a while, because about minute number 45, 46, you're in the zone. But it's really tough to keep an iron match going, because You think back to like Brett and Sean. There was a lot of wrestling on the mat. This crowd, the modern crowd, it's not that they don't appreciate that, but you have to move to keep them engaged.
Yep.
And so it's tough now. It's tougher now for sure to do a modern Iron Man match, only because you want to keep them interested in what's going on. That's the toughest physical challenge I've had. 2 of those with Darren Williams. I've had 3 of them with Cody Hawk. So that's tough. And another kind of, I don't know how far we're allowed to pull the veil back here.
As
But
far as you want, yeah.
what's that?
As far as you want, yeah.
So, like, just the different styles. So, a lot of times it's a physical challenge. Like, for example, when I did my WWE stuff or tryouts and stuff, they want you to memorize everything you're going to do and everything you're going to say before you do it. And how I was trained by Les Thatcher was, okay, we're going to get down 1 or 2 things, but we're going to go out there and we're going to feel that audience out. We're going to see how they react or what they're thinking. And I think that's the way to do it, because you don't know how the audience is going to respond to you. There's times where I've wrestled, in like Georgia, and I'm like, oh my God, I'm from Detroit. I'm going to go out there. They're going to hate my guts. Well, guess what? There's a large African-American population in Georgia, and they like wrestling. And so when I go out there with like the Detroit stuff, they're kind of feeling it. So if they've never seen me before, they're like, oh, I like this guy, and they might not like my opponent. So we're not going to force, we're not on, when you're in TV or on like WWE or whatever, you got to do what you're told, because the live audience, they'll tell you even when you're there, the live audience does not matter. Wow. The audience that you're playing to is the millions of people that are watching on TV. That's why you never really see that much engagement from WWE guys or girls with the audience. Okay. But when you're on independent wrestling, that audience is everything. Yep. So you got to be able to be good enough to switch it up. Yep. And so that could be a challenge, because there's a communication issue too. They their moves are different than our moves, the name, in our area. So when you go down there, it's like, okay, well, I want to do this, or this, or this, and they'll be like, what? And then it's like, you're like, uh-oh. So that's kind of so that makes it tough to do it in front of the audience, because you might say something like, they're just like, what? I don't get it. So that could be a physical challenge. Luckily, and I'm not saying this to brag, I promise I'm not. I'm stronger than most people. So if it goes sideways, I'm not hurting them, but I can put them where I want to put them.
That's a great thing to have in your repertoire there, because that could go. Yeah, so you mentioned that you were trained by Les Thatcher, correct?
Yes, that's right.
What was that like? What was he like as a trainer?
Absolute maniac. Like a lot of people. So when I was training with Les, a lot of people were like, oh, he's the old man or this or that. And, but like everything that Les taught fundamentally was sound. Right. And like a lot of people go, he's just a mean old man. Les cared about people, like students. I'll tell a story about it. Mm-hmm. There was this one kid, he's passed away since, but he didn't feel like coming to practice. When you started training with Les, it was $4,000 a month down. Then it was $189 a month in gym dues for the first 2 years. And then if you kept training at the building, it was $80 a month. These kids now don't have to pay that. But this kid, who's since passed away, he came in and gave Les the $4,000, and he stayed home one day because he just didn't feel like coming to practice. When I first started training, a lot of people were from other parts of, other parts of America. It was not common to have. We were all, strangers. We were not people who were local to Southern Ohio or Indiana.
Right.
And Les actually left practice and dragged this kid out of his apartment to get him and made him come to practice.
Wow. You're coming whether you like it or not. That's good though, because I mean, sometimes you got to give that person, because that's just like a mental thing, right? I mean, I mean, you got to get that mental block out. And sometimes it takes someone like that to give you a kick in the butt, you know?
You absolutely do need that, and it's tough too because I don't know if you guys are from this area.
Yeah.
It is really hard for somebody like somebody who's not from like Southern Ohio to live in Southern Ohio.
Mm-hmm.
It is really difficult. It's hard to make friends. It's hard to meet people. It's hard to date. And for a lot of guys who were wrestling at that time, it could be really isolating.
Right.
You try to, everybody here's kind of been friends since they were kids or, whatever that looks like, but it's tough. Like, people would come from New York, and me from Detroit, even though Detroit's 3 hours away, it's like another planet. Mm-hmm. And I'm not saying that's good or bad. I'm not saying that's good or bad or good. It was just really difficult. But Les was like, you paid me, you're here, you're going to learn how to wrestle to the best of your capability, or just get out.
Right. Don't waste his time.
And he was right. He would say things like, wrestling's too hard. You either care about it and you're all in, or just stop it.
Right.
And it was great stuff, and and a lot of people have this, I don't want to say negative impression of Les, because everybody will talk about him as an announcer and as a trainer about how great he is, and they're right. But, he was just hard to understand for some people. His disposition was just rough. And I'm not saying this, as a personality, he'd never make it today.
No, right.
These kids could not handle it.
Right. No, you are right about that. That's the thing we need a little bit more. I mean, I'm 24 years old. Darren, you're a little bit older than I am, but even we need a little bit more. Our generation has been coddled a little bit too much for our whole lives, and it's one of those things where, as a society, not even just in wrestling, but just as a society, we need a little bit of a harder lesson. Yeah. I think people, not to try to get too whatever, but it's just, there are some people out there who are a little bit too coddled, they just expect things to be handed to them, or if it's too hard, they just don't do it. They make excuses for whatever reason. And that's what we kind of need a little bit. And I'm hoping that that's coming back a little bit more. I've kind of noticed a little bit as I've gotten older. I think that a little bit of that is coming back, where people, our generation's really focused on health. A lot of our what I'm saying, it's kind of back in style to be in the gym and working out and stuff. So I'm hoping that kind of mindset will follow also. But it is what it is, I guess. Society will do what it does.
You're right. It's not about being a tough guy. It's about, do you want this bad enough? Do you want to be, as far as it pertains to wrestling? I see these kids now, and, promoters are running out of money. They're running out of, and they'll just take money from whoever. And these kids are they're not, as long as they're paying, they're welcome. And I'm not saying this is Battle on the Border, because that's a great school. But, I've seen other schools out there in the Indies, they'll just take money from whoever and sign them up. And it's okay, well, you need to do this. And they'll be like, oh, I'm not doing that. I don't feel like it. Les would, literally grab you by the neck and just throw you out the door.
Yeah, right.
If you, when I first started, okay, so one of the, and this isn't me name dropping, but one of the people I trained with, and I never thought he liked me, and he probably didn't, and he probably still doesn't, is Nigel McGuinness. Wow. Nigel, he worked with me in the ring, but he was very stiff with me. He was very rough with me, and but it made me a better person because at some point I fought back and he loosened up.
Right.
You know, he like and maybe that's what he was trying to teach me.
Yeah.
But you know, him slapping me in the face or boxing my ears or you know giving me an arm drag and cinching in on that arm drag as soon as I hit the mat and pulling my shoulder like it was coming out of the socket. Like that's stuff you can't do anymore.
Right.
Because, and I'm sorry if I'm sounding like old guy complaining. I don't mean to do that. I'm just trying to give an example of like the difference in the training styles.
Yeah. Yeah. No, I will. I see what you're saying. I get what you're saying, and I think that I don't know if that'll ever come back necessarily. The training being different, that probably won't come back. But I'm hoping that just like future students or trainees will eventually at some point kind of force themselves, not necessarily. They'll force themselves to be dedicated. So far in the group that I'm training with, everybody does seem dedicated. We had like a couple people miss once because of like, personal issues with their family or something. So it was serious. It wasn't just like, I don't want to show up. So that's the one thing I have been really impressed with is that everyone's showed up.
I do want to be clear. I don't advocate the bullying stuff. I don't.
Right.
I think it's wrong. I'm not going to sit here and say you have to get beat up to be a wrestler. Mm-hmm. But I think the new generation also has to appreciate what the older generation had to go through just to get in the door.
Absolutely.
And say, you know what, I'm going to go real hard at this. So because this dude teaching me got beat up and he's not beating me up.
Right. And he back in the day he would have.
Yeah.
Because that's what he got and that's what he knows, you know.
No, I mean Hogan got his leg broke his very first training.
Yeah.
And that's how it used to be.
Yep.
You were injured severely on your first training session. If you powered through, healed up, and came back, that's when they taught you how to be a professional wrestler.
Yeah. They used to, they had to challenge you, make sure you wanted it bad enough, like you said. So let's go back a little bit here. Do you remember your first match, and do you remember what you were thinking going into it? And then also, afterwards, how'd you feel about it?
I surely do remember my first match. It was in Catawba, Ohio. I was part of a faction. So when I first started training, there was a group of us that were about ready to make our debut, and then WCW went under, and then HWA got to be one of the developmental territories.
Right, yeah.
And that was awesome. It was also upsetting because everybody who was about ready to debut got pushed back. We got pushed back like a year and a half. But I don't regret. There's no sour grapes there because what are you going to do? You're going to run an independent wrestling show. Who are you going to put on there? Me or X-Pac?
Exactly. Right. Yeah.
The main event at Montgomery County Fairgrounds in 2001 was X-Pac versus Raven. What am I going to do? Have sour grapes over that? The undercard's Benoit versus Guerrero.
Wow.
But here's the thing that was good about it. It was like that gave me such a great opportunity to learn from all those guys, even if it was just being their tackling dummy. But I was part of a group called the Black Militia. There was a bunch of us that they didn't really know what to do with creatively, but they wanted to start using us. And it was a 6-man tag. It was 3 of us in the group versus Hoss, who was the ring announcer, and he was one of those guys that was part of that group that was just starting to wrestle. Cliffhanger, the black redneck, and I don't know if you know who that is, but he's hilarious.
Yeah.
He's like do you know who Cliffhanger is?
I do not know.
Okay, so he did like a comedy gimmick very similar to what Tracy Smothers would do.
Okay.
Yeah. So he's a black guy, but he was like a pro-Confederate country black guy.
Right.
And obviously it would not really work out for him today doing that character.
Yeah.
However, back then it was played for comedy, and it was, I guess you quote unquote had to be there. But, that was, and then I can't remember who it was. It was a 6-man tag. I basically had like 4 spots But, in the 2 months before that, all I was doing was running in, beating people up, helping my fellow black militia members cheat to win. It was myself, Sean Osborne, Brian Jennings, and L.A. Knight.
Yeah.
And we it was a good time. After that match, it was just, I had to go to my car and cry because I never thought I'd make it.
Right.
I never thought I'd be able to do it, after being told, hey, you're going to do this, and then get pushed back a year and a half. It just made me a better performer, though. I'm appreciative of it.
Yeah, absolutely. That's a great story. We always ask that, and everyone. So, looking back, would you be proud of like showing someone that match if you could, or because a lot of times you hear people say like, "No, my first match was terrible." Now when I watch it back, I never want to watch it. But would you show people that match? Were you proud of it?
So, I would be proud of it because it was a match, but it felt more like a segment than a match. Mm-hmm. Because it was a promo. It was us running in. It was a bunch of run-ins, a bunch of schmazzes, and turned into a 6-man. And then we only had like 8 minutes, so it was basically just like spot after spot after spot. But I'd be proud. I'm definitely proud of that. It sounds so braggadocious, and I hate when wrestlers sit around and put themselves over. But
that's what we're about.
Like I look back, I watched that match, and I'm just like, for all of us that went to HWA, our first matches were better than 90% of other people's first matches. Right. And I think that's something to be, and that's because we just, we work like dogs. We put all the work in, and so I don't know if I'd be proud of it, but it wasn't as bad as I thought it was. Probably a long-winded answer, but no. It was good for what it was.
Yeah, that's good to hear because, like I said, I've heard people say before. I think Chris Jericho talked about it once on his podcast where he said something about not being super proud of it or not wanting to watch it backwards. So it's good that you have some pride about it. I think you should. I mean, your first one, of course, it's not going to be what you do later on in your career, but your first one's your first one. That's a landmark. Yeah. I mean, like you got emotional about it, and I feel like if I get lucky enough to be able to have a match, I think that would be my reaction also. So I appreciate it.
You're right, and you'll see once you get. I mean, I hate sounding like old guy, but like you'll see because it's like all those days of being in like a hot metal box, bumping, going home for Detroit to basically like half a day for Thanksgiving and Christmas, and then turning around and coming right back. Right. And going right back to work. Mm-hmm. And, I had this great, we're still friends today, but I had this great friend group in Detroit, and wrestling took their spot. Right. And, it's a lot of sacrifice and a lot of loneliness and isolation, but I'm telling you, man, once you get out there after all the bumps and the bruises and the doubt and people telling you you're not going to make it and you can't do it and you're not good enough, I'm telling you, man, once that music hits and that bell rings, man, there's no other place worth being in this world.
Oh man, I'm ready to run through a brick wall. I'm ready to. Well, Let's bring the podcast. We're on a high right now. Let's bring it back down because we do have to talk about Battle on the Border here and my threat, not my threat, but my accusation earlier that you're a threat to the company. So this was recently your debut in Battle on the Border, correct?
Yep, that's right.
What has it been like? How did that road? How come you've been wrestling for so long, and what took you so long to get to Battle on the Border?
I think really so. I say this, and I want you as a training wrestler to write this down. Okay? Mm-hmm. Put it on your bullet. This is what we call in sports bulletin board material. Okay. I've worked my whole life to go on last. Right. And when it comes to Battle on the Border, it's always a company that I've admired from afar. It's very well run. It's very polished. It's professional. It's diverse. It's the cream of the crop talent. But when I am a champion or a belt holder, at one company, this is just my opinion,
Mm-hmm.
I stay locked in to the competition at that company until I lose the belt. And that's not because I don't want to work anywhere else. It's because I'm trusted to be the standard bearer for the company. And when it comes to Battle on the Border, there's plenty of people there. I've wrestled for years. Sergeant Ledbetter, Hooks. There's a lot of those kids that, that way back, not way back, but a couple years ago were FGW. Yep. And trained there. And now that I've got a lot more matches behind me than I do in front of me, I'm snatching every penny I can, not money-wise, but for a legacy. And when it comes to this territory, this is the absolute pinnacle of independent territory. Southern Ohio, Kentucky, Indiana, Michigan, and I would say West Virginia and Kentucky, if I didn't mention Kentucky. But you'll never get, and I'm not trying to diss anybody else, out of this territory, you will never find better professional wrestling. And Battle of the Border is a challenge. And I don't think I would be able to say I was a territory legend or a territory any sort of significance unless I dominate at Battle on the Border, whether that's the heavyweight championship, whether I'm paired with somebody and I'm going for the tag championship. I'm just for every single opportunity I can to cement the legacy. And Battle on the Border is a big piece of that because it's so well run and it has the best of the best talent.
That's a great. I feel. I feel the same way. We started working with Battle on the Border about 2 years ago. Well, now it's about 3 years ago.
Going on 3 years.
3 years ago, and since we've been there, we started out as like a fan. Then we started doing sound, and the podcast came along with it, and all this stuff coming along. It has been. We've been lucky enough to go to some other shows, and I'm not trying to brag about Battle on the Border, but it does feel like it is different than some of the shows we've been to. So seeing you here,
absolutely.
Seeing you when we heard you were coming, we were really excited about it. And like I said, I feel like after what happened at Aurora Farmers Fair, me personally, I'm a little bit less excited about it. Darren, on the other hand, he seemed to really love what you did. He's somebody who doesn't use the word cheating. He is his own breed of guy there. But so let's talk about that a little bit. It seemed like you kind of rushed to the ring there, and you were trying to make a statement. What was your mindset? You said something about like basically taking over. Like we're not going to waste our time with these people. So you're coming in. You're coming straight for the. You want to you want to create a legacy here fast.
Yeah, it's you never know when your last match is.
Right.
You never know, man. You literally never know, and I know how to play the game, whether that's in the ring or in the locker room. I don't care if people like me. I care about being the best. And with the Aurora Farmers Fair, you got a guy in the ring who's 7'3".
American Giant, yeah.
You got young Avery Hertz. You got all these different talented young boys that think they've got, they got the world by the shoulders. And sometimes you got to take the wind out of them a little bit, or you got to make a statement. Like my very first match, it was against your heavyweight champion for the heavyweight championship. And I'm not one to make excuses, but if it hadn't been pouring down rain and that ring being like an ice rink, I'd be your champion right now.
Ooh, man.
I had that dude, and I don't care. I'll say it to the dude's face. I'll say it to anybody's face. I had the guy clocked, but next time that ring's not going to be wet. Mm-hmm. Next time I get in there with him, it's going to be dry, and he's going to have to face me down. And he's big and he's tough, and he's strong and he's deserving to be the champion, but he's not me. There's levels to this, right?
Yeah.
He'll get there someday, and he's well deserved as a champion now, but he's not there yet.
Okay. I can't. I won't say anything about that. I mean, I believe you. Trust me. I don't want any heat there. Now, coming up here at Moores Hill, November 23rd, correct? November 23rd, Moores Hill Mayhem.
You got it?
You have a 4-on-4 match. Not only is it a 4-on-4 match, it's also Fans Bring the Weapons Survivor Series style match. This is a big match, and you're going up against another team captain in Sergeant Ledbetter. Now I know, because we've been doing interviews for a while here, we're not going to get your game plan here, even though I'm going to ask you here in a couple seconds what's your game plan. But can you try to hint? I mean, you're not new to the business at all, but you're new to Battle on the Border. I'm sure you have friends who you can call in here, but what's your game plan?
Well, when it comes to hardcore matches, the thing that you have to remember, and I'm not telling anybody anything new, especially someone as professional and talented as Sergeant Ledbetter, all bets are off.
Right.
There's no rules. If you can't see, can you fight?
No.
If you can't walk, can you fight?
No.
If you can't hold a weapon, can you use a weapon?
No.
If I take away all three of those things, from the other team, what do you think our odds are?
I would say they're very low.
I would think that the odds of them being successful are very low. You're right. And because of this, I think that that's the game plan going in. When it comes to hardcore, it's trying to... It doesn't matter if you're big or small or tall or short or skinny or jacked or whatever you might be. All things are equal in a hardcore match, right?
Yeah.
Because you could chop anybody down. It's all about staying out of trouble, quote unquote, and inflicting as much damage as you can on the other person. And that's the game plan. Whoever I bring to the party knows this, and I'm sure whoever Ledbetter brings to the party is gonna know this too.
Right.
And it's just a matter of the best team winning. I know that sounds corny or boilerplate, but it's what it is. Because when it comes to hardcore, all bets are off.
Yeah, I'll tell you what, I'm extremely... Darren, you won't be there for this one, and I know
sucks.
You listen to this guy, he's a DJ, and he's missing it for a wedding. What an
A wedding?
A wedding? Who wants to go to weddings?
Just tell the couple you'll be at their next wedding.
Gotta pay their bill. Wait a minute. What? Their next wedding?
Yeah, that's the market to get into. Second weddings.
Divorce parties.
Divorce parties. Yeah.
Start, that's a whole new piece of business for you.
Yeah. See, I know we did these podcasts for a reason. We'll pay you for that business advice.
That's right.
Good. Too good for
10% commission. That's all I ask.
All right. Yeah, that's better than some rates, I'm sure. Darren, you have any final questions?
Nothing I can think of.
All right. Well, we'll let you finish this one off. As far as last words, Ben, if you want to I don't know if Sergeant Ledbetter.
Look, I'm grateful. I'm so grateful to be part of Battle on the Border. It's such a great company, so professional. And I know that, you think, oh, you're the bad guy or whatever, quote unquote. You're supposed to talk trash. I'm not going to do that because if I do that, it diminishes the opportunity here. Mm-hmm. What I will say is that Ledbetter is incredibly intelligent. He's incredibly tough. He's incredibly talented. I expect absolutely nothing less than his total best during this match. But you know what? I'm going to bring it too, because you can't get opportunities for championships unless you win matches.
Right.
And bottom line, I want another shot at Callaway. I want another shot at the heavyweight championship. I've got to win this one, and I'm going to win this one.
I'll tell you what, too. Also, another match of Moores Hill Mayhem is the American Giant and Paxton Callaway. Do you think Paxton Callaway will still be champion after that, or do you think American Giant's got it? Yeah, I know you're keeping
I
your
think
eye on him.
it's going to be a tough one because that American Giant, he's got a ton of seasoning, but I was in the ring with him at the Farmers, and man, look, I bench press over almost 400 pounds. I leg press 1,300 pounds. I squat 585 pounds. I ran at that guy, and it was like hitting a tank. So, as powerful as I am, Paxton's going to be in for a rough go of it with this guy. And I'm not saying that, Paxton's, it was a walk in the park with him. I thought I got hit with a cast iron frying pan when he chopped me. but it's going to be a big challenge for him because as tough as Paxton is, that guy is even bigger than Paxton is. So it's going to be I don't expect it to go very long, and I honestly, it's a toss up as to who wins, because it's going to be pretty intense.
Yeah, I agree. I'm so excited again for the people at home. November 23rd, Moores Hill Mayhem. Very excited about it. I think it's the third year that Bet on the Border has been there, so I'm very excited to be back. And I'm excited to see that 4-on-4 match, Ben, and I'm excited to see everybody there. It's going to be a great crowd. It's going to be a great show. Ben, we're going to let you go. We've held you for about as long as we can afford here. We'll talk about the payment for this afterwards. Thank you for joining us, though.
Sounds good, man. No problem.
And wait, if you ever want to come on again, just let us know.
That sounds great.
All right, thank you.
Thank you.
All right, have a great day, guys.
Yep, you too. All right. You got out of here so fast. I didn't even know. Oh, well, I guess the podcast is over.